Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds on artificial intelligence in healthcare. The potential our sources talk about, it's frankly staggering.
It really is.
We're talking about AI potentially acting like this super intelligent assistant, right? Learning from incredible amounts of data, seeing patterns humans might miss.
Spotting things, making predictions.
Yeah, predictions that could genuinely improve how patients do, make hospitals run smoother, boost efficiency. It sounds almost revolutionary for healthcare delivery.
And it's not just theory anymore. We're seeing AI being tested, even used in so many areas.
Like diagnostics.
Absolutely. AI in diagnostics, helping read scans, for instance. Or models that try to predict which patients might be at higher risk for, say, a chronic disease down the line.
Wow.
The potential applications cover, well, pretty much the whole healthcare journey, from admin stuff right up to really complex clinical decisions.
Okay, so that vision it's compelling. AI augmenting what humans can do. But, and I have a big but that jumps out from the sources you shared, this amazing potential comes with a really significant risk.
A critical one, yeah.
And that's what this deep dive is all about, using your source material as our guide. Algorithmic bias.
Exactly. Our goal here is to unpack what that actually means in healthcare AI. Why isn't it just a technical bug? Why is it such a risk?
Right.
Where does it creep into these systems? And crucially, what do the sources suggest we can actually do about it? Especially in really diverse places like India, for example.
It's about making sure this tech helps everyone, right? Wisely and fairly.
That's the core challenge.
Okay, so let's dig in. The sources seem to point again and again to the data itself as the main source of the problem. How does that work exactly?
Well, think about how AI learns. It finds patterns in the data it's trained on.
Okay.
If that data, the information we feed it, reflects existing problems, like, say, unequal access to healthcare, or historical biases in how different groups were diagnosed or treated, or even if some groups just aren't represented much in the data.
Then the AI just learns those biases.
It essentially absorbs them, yes. And then it applies those bias patterns when it makes future predictions or decisions. It's like raising a kid on biased info. They'll likely reflect it.
So it's more than the AI just making a random error. It's actively learning existing unfairness, human or system-level unfairness, and then keeping it going.
Exactly that. It can perpetuate and even amplify those biases found in the training data. This can lead straight to unfair or discriminatory outcomes for patients.
And machine learning, which is a big part of AI, is particularly susceptible if the data isn't representative.
Very much so. There's a good hypothetical example. Imagine training a model to predict how patients respond to a drug, but you mainly use data from one specific demographic.
Yeah.
Well, that model probably won't work as well. Maybe it'll be significantly less accurate when you try to use it on patients from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
The source puts it plainly. Train on one group, it might be biased against others.
And that feels incredibly relevant for places with huge diversity, like India, as you mentioned, where patients are so varied.
Absolutely critical there.
So this isn't just about slight inaccuracies or efficiency hits. This could mean AI embedding discrimination right into diagnosing illnesses, recommending treatments.
Or even deciding who gets access to certain types of care. It's serious.
One source called it an ethical imperative to make sure AI isn't biased against certain patient groups.
It is. It has to be. Because the consequences go beyond just bad predictions. We're talking about potentially widening health gaps that already exist.
Eroding trust.
Eroding patient trust in these systems, definitely. And it could lead to all sorts of legal and ethical problems down the road. It's not just a tech problem, it's an ethical one for everyone involved, developers, doctors, regulators, everyone.
Okay, so it's a deep problem. Given how AI is weaving into so many parts of healthcare, where does this bias actually show up? What kinds of applications are vulnerable?
That's the tricky part. It can show up almost anywhere AI is used because it's touching so many processes. We can sort of group the examples we see in the sources. First, think about clinical support and diagnostics.
Like reading x-rays.
Exactly. AI in radiology spotting lung nodules, signs of stroke on scans. These systems learn from huge image libraries.
Right.
But if those libraries mostly contain images from certain demographics, or use specific scanner types, or even had certain lighting, the AI might just not be as accurate when looking at images from underrepresented groups. Improving detection rates is great, but not if it only works well for some people.
So a doctor might trust an AI flag, but that flag could be less reliable for Mrs. Jones than Mr. Smith just because the AI didn't see enough patients like Mrs. Jones in training.
Precisely. Or take predictive analytics using AI for patient management and assessing risk.
Predicting who might get readmitted to the hospital.
Yeah, things like predicting outcomes, how long someone might stay in the hospital, or, like you said, readmission risk. These models learn from historical data about how patients were managed before.
And that historical data might have its own biases built in.
Exactly. Biases about who got timely follow-up care, who had access to certain resources. If that's in the data, the AI can learn it and inadvertently disadvantage certain groups when making predictions. Like, reducing hospital stays is efficient, but the model needs to be fair. Otherwise, it might push some people out too soon based on biased historical patterns.
That makes sense. What about the more operational stuff, like managing resources?
Even things that seem purely operational, like optimizing staffing schedules or managing the supply chain inventory, they aren't immune either.
How so?
These AI models learn from past usage data. If resource allocation in the past was biased, maybe certain clinics serving specific communities were always short-staffed or understocked, the AI could learn that pattern.
And just keep doing it. Or make it worse.
It could perpetuate or even amplify that inequity. Reducing inventory costs with AI is great for the bottom line, but you absolutely have to check if the AI's predictions about what supplies are needed are skewed by those old biased demand patterns that left some patient groups shortchanged.
Wow, okay, so even ordering bandages needs careful checking for bias.
It does, because it ultimately affects who gets what care. And it extends further. Think about medication management or even pharmacogenomics.
Using genetics to predict drug responses.
Exactly. AI analyzing genetic profiles to predict how well a drug might work or if it could cause side effects. This relies heavily on genomic databases.
Which might not be very diverse.
Historically, that's been a huge issue. Yeah. Many large genomic databases overrepresent certain populations. So if the AI trains on that data, its predictions about drug effectiveness or risks could be inaccurate or biased for people from underrepresented genetic backgrounds.
It really feels like almost any AI system in healthcare that learns from past human data could potentially inherit these biases.
That's really the crux of it. It's a pervasive risk tied directly to the data the AI learns from.
So this is complex, it's widespread. How do the sources say we should even begin to tackle this? What's the way forward?
Well, there's no single magic fix offered, unfortunately. It's more of a multi-pronged strategy. The absolute foundation, mentioned over and over, is dealing with the data itself.
Better data.
Not just more data, but data that's genuinely diverse, representative, and high quality. Data that actually mirrors the variety of patients the AI is intended to serve. Getting data acquisition and preparation right, including validating it, making sure it's properly anonymized, that has to happen right at the start.
So that old saying, garbage in, garbage out is, well, bias garbage in, bias garbage out.
Pretty much, yeah. If your training data is biased, the AI will learn and deploy that bias. But it goes beyond just the data. The sources also really push for transparency and explainability in the algorithms, sometimes called XAI.
Meaning you need to understand how the AI reached its conclusion.
Exactly. If a doctor can understand the why behind an AI's recommendation, they're in a much better position to question it, spot potential bias, and decide whether to follow it or not. Transparency is directly linked to finding and fixing bias.
So it can't just be a black box giving answers.
No, definitely not. And another huge piece is rigorous validation, specifically checking performance across different subgroups.
So not just looking at the average performance.
No, that's not enough. You absolutely have to measure how well the model performs things like accuracy, sensitivity, specificity for different demographic groups, age, gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, whatever is relevant. You need to ensure it's not failing certain groups while looking good overall.
And once an AI system is built, validated, and deployed, are you done then?
No, the sources strongly suggest it has to be an ongoing thing. Healthcare changes, populations shift, treatments evolve.
Right.
So a model that seemed fair when it was launched could drift and become biased over time as the real-world data it sees starts to differ from its original training data.
Okay.
That's why continuous monitoring of how the AI performs after it's been deployed is so crucial. There's talk of continuous learning loops where models get updated with new data and outcomes. This is vital for catching and correcting bias that might pop up later.
Like a feedback loop for fairness.
Exactly. And this idea of iterative development, you build, test, deploy, monitor, adjust, and repeat. always keeping bias mitigation in mind. It's not a one-time check.
It sounds like constant vigilance is needed. That seems like a huge effort, especially in places that are already incredibly diverse.
It is a significant undertaking.
Yeah.
And contexts like India, for example, add extra layers of complexity.
How so?
Well, think about the sheer linguistic diversity. For AI tools to be truly fair and usable by everyone, they need strong multilingual capabilities.
Okay.
Then there's infrastructure. Access to reliable internet, computing power. It can vary hugely, especially outside big cities. That affects everything from collecting good data to deploying AI systems reliably.
And digital literacy, too, I imagine.
Absolutely. How comfortable are different healthcare workers or even patients with using these new digital tools? The interfaces need really careful design to be accessible to everyone.
And the data itself must look pretty different from what you'd find in, say, the US or Europe.
Fundamentally different in many ways. Finding standardized, high-quality data can be more challenging. And integrating AI with national initiatives, like India's Ayushman Bharat digital mission, their big digital health push is key.
Using standards like FHIR.
Yes, leveraging standards like FHIR is important for interoperability, but you have to be careful not to accidentally introduce new biases when you start combining data from potentially fragmented or inconsistent sources. And when you're tailoring AI to specific needs, like improving healthcare access in rural areas, you have to be hyper-aware of the biases already baked into existing data that might reflect those historical access problems.
So you can't just drop a model built in Silicon Valley into a clinic in rural India and expect it to work fairly.
Definitely not. It needs solutions designed for the local context, understanding the local environment.
Which requires collaboration.
Deep collaboration, yes, between the tech developers, the clinicians on the ground, policymakers, and importantly, the communities themselves. Building trust and acceptance is key. It's about responsible innovation that's really rooted in the specific place it's meant to serve.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The big takeaway seems to be algorithmic bias in healthcare AI is a really serious, widespread risk. It comes directly from the AI learning patterns from data that already contains human or system-level unfairness.
Right.
And that can lead to unfair, even discriminatory outcomes for patients across all sorts of applications: diagnostics, risk prediction, operations, patient support, the list goes on.
It does. And the way forward, based on these sources, isn't simple, but involves a consistent effort on multiple fronts.
Prioritizing diverse, representative, high-quality data.
Foundational. Plus building transparency and explainability into the AI.
So we know how it's working.
Exactly. Then rigorously validating performance.
Yeah.
Specifically checking how it does for different patient subgroups.
Not just the average.
Never just the average. Implementing continuous monitoring once it's out in the real world.
To catch drift.
Yes. And proactively tackling those context-specific challenges, like the ones we discussed for India language, infrastructure, data variations, right from the design stage through to implementation.
And all of this needs to happen within a framework of responsible innovation, collaboration, and presumably evolving regulations.
Absolutely. The sources really drive home this point.
Yeah.
The future of healthcare might be intelligent, yes, but it has to be fair and equitable too.
Building that trust, making sure AI truly helps doctors and nurses equitably, that's paramount.
It is. It's presented not just as a technical puzzle to solve, but as a core ethical challenge, one that everyone involved really needs to tackle head-on if we want AI to actually live up to its positive potential for everyone.
And why should you, listening right now, care about all this? Well, because as AI gets more and more integrated into healthcare, making sure it's fair directly impacts the quality of care, the safety of care, and the access to care that you or people you know might receive down the line. It's absolutely fundamental to building a future healthcare system that truly works for all of us.